State fans. I'm Max Ralph. That's Johnny McGonigal, and we're here for another live blue-white breakdown on this Thursday afternoon. The only difference, Johnny, is it's a Penn State bye week, so there's no game this weekend. But I don't think that's really knocked down much of the intrigue around Penn State right now because, of course, the next game is the big one. The whiteout in Beaver Stadium. The Oregon Ducks are coming to town. I'd be a little surprised if it's not a top 5 matchup by next week. Of course, Oregon did fall in the rankings last week. They're number 6 right now. It's going to be top 10 either way. It's going to be a barn burner. We're pretty excited about it, I know. But Johnny, how are we spending the bye week? I guess it's not really a bye week for you with Eagles coverage.
No, I mean it's a bye week for half of my job.
Yeah.
With obviously Penn State not playing this weekend. The Eagles have the Rams on Sunday at the Link at 1:00. So it's going to be an easier week for me because it's a home game. It's 15 minutes away from my house and not. I was in Kansas City last weekend while you guys were at Beaver Stadium for the Villanova game. I was in KC for Eagles Chiefs, which Arrowhead was awesome. Kansas City barbecue was awesome.
Yeah.
I was able to get the spot that I was at to put Penn State Villanova on one of the many TVs, so I keep a close eye as opposed to just watching it on my phone. So no, it was a good weekend, but a busy weekend traveling and everything else. So a more relaxed weekend for me as well. And I know you and Bob are going to be enjoying a full bye week this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny, you say Eagles Rams, and I can't help but think about Saquon Barkley last year. That was a heck of a game. But let's talk, Johnny. As you said, you were traveling last weekend, so you weren't at Beaver Stadium. Haven't had you on a podcast since Saturday's win over Villanova. What sticks out to you right now about Penn State? This 3-0 start. I mean, it's hard to say that you've outscored opponents 132-17 and feel like there's some meat left on the bone, but I feel like that's the general sentiment right now. Johnny, is that how you feel? And what's maybe one or two specific takeaways that you have so far from the non-conference schedule?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is not a surprise for really anyone. It's what you and Bob have talked a lot about and what a lot of people have talked about over these 3 games, and it's the offense. It's Drew Aller. It was Nick Singleton. Like I wrote that column before the Villanova game about how both of those guys, Drew and Nick, had to let it rip, as James Franklin had alluded to in his press conference, that they were playing, they were overthinking a little bit, playing a little timid perhaps, but I don't think that's going to be an issue moving forward. I think they were just trying to be too perfect in these games in which they are, big favorites and they're supposed to look, amazing as like a national title contender, all off season and preseason. But the offense overall, I'm curious what you think, Max, because from my vantage point and kind of what I've been watching from Andy Kotelnicki's unit, a lot of people would just say, oh, it's Villanova, it's FIU, it's Nevada. Like they're going to keep it really vanilla and not really show anything. At least from what I've seen, and again, let me know what you think, but I feel like they've been throwing out a lot and they're just trying to see what works and what doesn't before they ultimately narrow that playbook ahead of Oregon and ahead of the Big Ten slate. Because, it hasn't looked crisp, it hasn't looked clean. And I promise you, like, if they just ran out there with like 10 plays, they know that would work every single time against the Villanova and an FIU and Nevada, like they would probably look a lot better. But at least from my vantage point, it feels like, that they're running a lot more different stuff and trying and the new wide receivers, the 3 new transfers coming in, not having a Tyler Warren, like there are some moving pieces on this offense. And it feels like they threw a lot out there just to see what worked. And then they kind of go to the drawing board in the bye week to figure out, okay, what worked best, what didn't work at all, and what can we run and what can't we run against Oregon.
That's an interesting take, and I certainly think that there's truth to it because you're right. If Penn State wanted to just run wide zone every single play against Villanova, I'm pretty sure that things would have worked out well. And obviously, it was not just that. We saw that 2-point conversion that we we like to talk about.
Yeah,
Uh,
talk about throwing stuff out there. I mean, the two
right.
point the 2 point conversion against Nevada, where everyone's like, "What the hell was that?"
Yeah.
That's the ultimate example of like,
Yeah.
okay, well that didn't work. Let's not do that again.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've seen Traber Pena used like on jet sweeps out of the backfield once. I think we've seen a little bit of Wildcat. I guess it's not that it's ultra vanilla right now for me. I feel like Andy Kotelnicki hasn't taken his best shot yet. Let's put it that way. I feel like they've done enough things that they wanted to do in order to show, yes, the creativity's still there. Yes, we can line up in the Wildcat still. Yes, we can. You know, I don't even know what else I'm missing off the top of my head, but I do think that there's aspects of that where they did show things, and it's not entirely vanilla. But like I said, I don't think Andy Kotelnicki's given it his best shot yet. I don't think he should have by any means. I think there is a balance between not showing your best on film, but showing enough on film that teams have to prepare for different things. I think that's probably where Penn State has landed. Um, but I don't know. It's hard to say because you're right. They've done some stuff. I'm just anticipating that things might look a little bit cleaner against Oregon. And that's not to say that I think Penn State is going to score more on offense than it did, against any of the three opponents that already played. I just think things might look a little more put together. The drives that do end up scoring might be long marching drives, might have a little more explosive plays in them. And I think I'll let give your own take on this, but I do think that's kind of the big thing is the explosive plays haven't really been there to this point. And I think that there are going to be some things that Kotelnicki can scheme up in the future in real competition to make that happen.
Yeah, and my take or point about you like doing a lot and figuring out what works and what doesn't. Obviously, it's not their entire playbook. Obviously, they're keeping things for Oregon. They might not even use some things against Oregon and save it for Ohio State. Like,
Right.
that's just kind of the natural progression of an offense and a playbook as you go throughout the season. And as I mentioned, and as we've talked about, all off season about these three new transfers coming in, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross, and Trevor Pena. Those guys need to grow as the season goes on. Obviously, they had a preseason and an offseason to work on the playbook and develop a rapport with Drew, but there's still a learning curve here, and that was a big takeaway for me as well through these three games. Is we saw impacts from all three of those receivers, and it kind of came in. They each had their own week, right? Kyron Hudson felt like he had week one. That 31-yard touchdown, Drew rolling to his left and making a nice catch in the end zone. Obviously, the Devontae Ross one-handed, guy draped all over him catch for a touchdown against FIU, and then Trevor Pena finds the end zone against Villanova. Those are building blocks. Those are tangible moments for those guys to get in the end zone of Beaver Stadium alone, just on vibes, but also just to see that they have a place in this offense, that they are valued, that they are going to bring a lot to this group, and they're going to be relied upon as this season goes along. Getting all three of those guys involved, like if say Pena, wasn't involved, or any of these guys weren't involved, didn't find the end zone, like it would be a storyline, going into the Oregon game, like, oh, it hasn't happened for this guy yet, and he was supposed to be a big part of this offense. It has happened for all three of those guys in spurts, in their own little moments, and I think that's a really big deal moving forward.
I think you bring up a great point there because that was by design. I mean, it was by design to have each of those guys get acclimated with Drew Aller, figure it out on the field in the stadium, especially Ross, who had the offseason injury, and they weren't really sure was even going to be able to play until Oregon. And I think that was a major success, the way that those guys did show up and had good games for each of them. That's maybe where, my wonder about what this offense could be, that's maybe where it comes from, because I think in a game like Oregon, it needs to be all of them. And I don't think that we've had a game yet where the playbook has said it could be anybody. I think it has been a concerted effort at times to get each guy involved, especially in the second half. If it's the third quarter, I remember in week one against Nevada, they went out there and they made sure that they got Khalil Dinkins a catch like late in the game. A couple of those kinds of things were happening in the non-conference. And so I think it kind of goes back to my point about I don't think Andy Kotelnicki's given it his best shot yet. I think moving forward, we'll probably see all of those guys working a little more in tandem rather than just targeting, okay, this guy needs to have a day. This guy needs to have a day. We need these guys comfortable. And I think, this might open up another can of worms here, Johnny, but I think the same is probably true for the running backs and the fact that, whether James wanted, he didn't really exactly say it, but at least on the first drive of the game against Villanova, they were feeding Nick Singleton, and that seemed incredibly deliberate.
Yeah, Katron had 6 carries until the
Start of the fourth quarter.
Until the start of the fourth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Katron, another big takeaway for me through 3 games. We heard about it all offseason. We heard James Franklin say, hey, this is his first offseason without dealing with an injury, without a surgery, or without, something that has nagged at him and held him back from conditioning, from getting better, right? And we've seen that. We have seen that. Katron Allen has looked like one of the best. We knew going into the season that both of these guys were among the best running backs in the country, but even still, it always felt like, and maybe it was the Pennsylvania kid thing, maybe it was the big runs as a freshman, the Rose Bowl game that Nick had. It always felt like, even if Penn State fans don't want to tell themselves this or acknowledge this, it always felt like it was always Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, not Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I think Katron Allen has really, really played well, to start this year. Not that we're surprised that he's a good running back, because we know that he is, but he has looked especially good, through 3 games, and you can see that he's healthy. You can see that he improved over the offseason. You can see that he lost a little bit of weight and is moving a little bit better. And combine that with his, elite vision, Katron Allen has been incredible so far, and I would expect that to continue, just like it continued from the CFP run that he had, which was awesome until now. For Nick Singleton, like you mentioned, the impetus to get him the ball so early against Villanova, get him in the end zone, get him a bunch of touches, I think is important, is big, because you need him to be firing on all cylinders when Oregon comes to town next weekend. I cannot wait for that game. I really can't. But and we saw those 2 guys, have big games against Oregon in the Big Ten title game too, Max.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly what the number was, but I think there were over 200 total between them. It was really good stuff. So I'm certain it's out there. Katron Allen, the thing to put it into numbers, I don't think Nick Singleton's been bad. I've said that over and over. I think he's missed some runs. I think it looked a little bit better against Villanova, which is important. It needs to keep getting better. But Katron Allen has 7 fewer carries so far through 3 games. And he's outgained him. He's outgained Singleton by almost 100 yards. I think the exact number is 97. 7 fewer carries, I think 97 yards more. And that's just key. I mean, even if you take out his 67-yard touchdown, it's 6 carries with 30 more yards, 6 fewer carries with 30 more yards. He's outgaining Nick Singleton in every way. He's just been really good. And it's less of a slight to Singleton and more of a compliment for Katron Allen, because he really seems to have found another gear that, like you said, we kind of heard about with the weight loss and everything, but this is the best we've seen Katron Allen, and he's a guy who already had been really, really good in his career. But Johnny, I think it's worth probably looking a little bit to the other side of the ball as well here.
Before we do that, Max.
Yeah.
So while we're on the topic of Nick and Katron, just something I wanted to talk about, and we didn't cover this in our pre-podcast meeting.
Yeah.
But so I had a story this week. I talked to Saquon Barkley down at the NovaCare complex, the Eagles training facility, and it wasn't his day to talk last week. And so typically how that works, there's open locker room. Guys typically have a day to talk where they stand by their locker in a scrum, do their media obligations, and then that's that. But so it wasn't Saquon's day to talk, but I asked him if he had a minute to talk about, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And he's like, yeah, of course. And I asked him about the rushing record, about the all-time charts that Nick and Katron are chasing, chasing Saquon, and ultimately Evan Royster, who sits atop the rushing yards record, but Saquon owns the rushing touchdowns record that Nick Singleton is only 7 away from now. He's atop the all-time all-purpose record that Nick is, I think, 630 yards away, 633 yards away or so from passing. And I asked Saquon, like, do you want those guys to pass you? Like, is that something you're rooting for? Like, are you territorial over these records or anything? And he said, no, like, I would love for it to happen, and he says that they're both really talented. They both work really hard. And the one note that he said, which is, an obvious, but he was like, if to be honest, if one of them was elsewhere, the other probably would have done it already in terms of breaking the record, which is a fair point because, it's something that we've talked about before, and over again, but it's worth repeating that Nick and Katron sharing these carries, sharing responsibilities over a 4-year career is super rare. And it's really cool to see a guy like Saquon who, he was going for the all-time single season NFL rushing record last year, and Eric Dickerson, who owns it, very openly, publicly came out and said he absolutely does not want Saquon to pass him.
Right.
And then so he experienced that, and so maybe it's informed a little bit by that. But I think Saquon really appreciates what Nick and Katron have kind of brought to this program, and that they both came back together for this season. So if you haven't checked that out yet, go on Penn Live. It was a really cool conversation with Saquon about those two guys who obviously are a huge part of this program and a huge part of the reason why Penn State's a national title contender this year.
Yeah, great perspective that you were able to secure there. And I'm not really surprised to see Saquon rooting for them. He's been, even if it's not been super visible, and I mean, he's been a busy guy, like he's still playing in the NFL. He's definitely been an influence on those guys, when they've been able to get together. I think he's met with, some of the younger running backs, some of the recruits that are coming in. Saquon's presence and, aura, for lack of a better word, still has ripple effects at Penn State. So it's good to see. Great story for you. Make sure you check it out. Just want to give a reminder, we are live right now every Thursday at noon. No game this week, so no game predictions. But if you have questions, you want to hear about something, lay it on us. Johnny, we had one comment that I wanted to mention from Brentski, who's in here pretty often. Will you guys consider call-in questions rather than just the chat? Could be more interactive. It's not something we have considered. I'll be honest. We might have to run that one up the ladder and see if that's a possibility. Anyway, Johnny,
that might be one. That might be one for if it's not live. Not saying because I'm sure that our loyal listeners and watchers have legitimate good questions that they would love to call in. But also we could get some, maybe in Oregon week, like a Ducks fan would call in and say something unsavory, and we don't want that. So
maybe.
In principle, I like the idea, but it's just a matter of working out. Maybe it's a pre-recorded episode that we do.
It could be. Johnny, we got a question from our guy David Demkoski, who's always here. Appreciate it. I do, before we get to him, I want to just kind of wrap this up. And Bob and I talked a ton about the defense on Monday, but as you and I started this thing with offense, give me your quick first big takeaway on the defense and Jim Knowles in his first year, and just kind of what you've seen so far.
Yeah, it's been as expected. I mean, this defense, it's not like it was bad last year. It was one of the best units in the country, and Jim Knowles has just enhanced that a little bit. I'm looking at individual performances too, like Chaz Coleman, obviously a huge standout through 3 games. He was coming on strong in the summer, and we expected for him to have an impact. But this level of impact, this level of play so far from a true freshman who was playing quarterback in high school just a short time ago, like that, I didn't expect him to be that good this soon. We'll see how he plays against Oregon and in the Big Ten slate. But really impressed with Chaz Coleman. Also really impressed with Amari Campbell owning that Mike role, coming over from North Carolina after transferring in. Tamir Robinson leaves. Penn State already kind of needed a linebacker, but the need was enhanced even more when Robinson left for USC. And Amari Campbell has come in and just been really, really good, really good. So those are my 2 standouts so far. I mean, Xavier Gilliam, Ty Blanding at D tackle. We knew what Zane Durant could do, and we kind of also knew going into these 3 games that Dennis Sutton would be double teamed, and Zane Durant would be double teamed, but I think as we get into the Big Ten slate and these offensive lines are a little bit better, maybe a little bit more confident against a Deny and a Zane. I think they'll get more opportunities to show what they've been able to do. And I mean, Deny has already done that. He's taken on triple teams and still ended up with a TFL. Like that's just kind of the way he works and what he does. But I think in terms of the stats and everything else for Durant specifically, I think we're going to see that come on a little bit stronger in Big Ten play.
Yeah, I think for me, and I talked about this on Monday, so impressed with the linebackers, Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas specifically. They've done some really nice things. Of course, still looking to get a little bit of depth there. Alex Tash is a name to keep in mind, the freshman from Greater Latrobe. But outside of that position, I've been really kind of wowed by the depth around the defense, more so than I expected. I mean, you talk about the Chaz Coleman, a little bit of Jalen Harvey, the defensive tackle room, especially. I mean, Eni White comes in with the second string defense and immediately is getting sacks and TFLs. Owen Wafel was just dominating in practice the other day from what we saw for our media viewing session. And Gilliam, Ty Blanding, they've all done really good things. I think the defensive line has certainly exceeded my expectations at this point. And we already knew that the cornerback room and the safeties were going to be really deep with a lot of talent. So I think that's what sticks out to me. Johnny, let's
on the corners though, real quick, because
yeah.
Has AJ Harris been targeted at all? I think it's been once, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's ultimate respect, right?
Yeah.
That's when you know that you are a damn good cornerback, is when you've been targeted once through 3 games. That's going to change, right? Especially Oregon coming in, Dante Moore, which was one of my biggest question marks, maybe my biggest question mark for Oregon coming into this year. And we can get into, Oregon and where they kind of fit to, in the grand scheme of college football, the rankings, CFP projections, all that kind of stuff if we want to. But that was my biggest question for Oregon coming into the year was Dante Moore. And he has looked super, not only efficient, but explosive quarterbacking the Ducks. And I mean, Penn State secondary is going to be tested next week, really for the first time this year.
Yeah, absolutely true. Let's get to David's question, a bye week topic. Is there an anti-Penn State bias among some national media? David gives us a particular shout out to ESPN's Heather Dinich. Is there an anti-PSU bias? And Omni Lead Academy comes in and says, pro SEC bias is the culprit. Penn State gets hit by proxy. Johnny, I'm just going to let you run with that one.
Sure. On the ESPN SEC thing, I could see it because think about the TV contract that ESPN has with SEC. They are the only carrier of SEC football. Now, the same could be said that, hey, maybe Fox has a pro Big Ten bias because they're the leading rights holder for the Big Ten, along with CBS and NBC. Obviously, ESPN has the SEC network and has Paul Feinbaum, who is the biggest of SEC homers. But even beyond that, I don't know if there's a bias against Penn State. I mean, I saw in the preseason a lot of outlets, and not just outside of ESPN too, like Yahoo and CBS. Like there was a lot of national outlets. It wasn't just me that picked Penn State to win the national championship, right? They were a popular pick. So I don't necessarily see an anti-Penn State bias overall. But if you were to just drill down into the SEC and ESPN and that relationship, I could see that. Yeah. I mean, look, like last year, the amount of people who were talking, and it wasn't just ESPN, but a lot of people who were just banging the table for 9-3 Ole Miss to get in the playoff was, and I wrote a lot about it and called it out. Like it was like embarrassing, honestly. So I saw it more last year than I've seen so far this year. Now, for some, are some people rating LSU too high? After the Clemson win, when we've seen that Clemson isn't very good. I mean, I dropped LSU a couple spots in my AP poll this week. I still see people across the country who are ranking them number 1 or number 2 in the country, and I don't understand that at all personally. But yeah, that's just me getting on my soapbox for a quick second.
this has been a banner year for the AP poll.
It's
Let's
been something else, man. It's been
yeah.
something. We don't need to dive into the whole
No,
Florida
we don't.
USF thing, but
We don't.
yeah, it's been something else.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I just, for my 2 cents, the SEC thing, the SEC ESPN thing is real.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are dollars behind the scenes there that make a difference in what gets covered and how it gets covered. It's just the truth, whether it's right or not. Um, as far as like an anti Penn State bias, I don't necessarily think that exists. I think it's probably more so a product of the fact that Penn State just hasn't done it yet. I mean, it's not going to get covered like I mean, again, taking out ESPN and the SEC, Ohio State, Michigan have won national titles the last 2 years, and Ohio State did it all throughout the 2010s. Like Penn State kept falling short, and like I'm not diving into the fire James Franklin debate right now because that's not what this is about. But Penn State hasn't gotten over that hump, and you're not going to get the same love when you haven't done it. I mean, a lot of non ESPN uh, parties are going to say, I'll believe it when I see it, and then I'll give you the love, and that's just kind of how it goes. Um,
That's why I was surprised that so many people picked Penn State to win the national title in the preseason. Like
yeah,
every like, and I love doing this in the preseason, just listening to really as many podcasts as I can from like national outlets to try to get the feel. Like I know the feel around the Penn State beat and how we view the team and the pros, the cons, the positives and negatives, et cetera, et cetera. But I like to listen to and be like, all right, what's the national feel around this team? And there were a lot of people picking Penn
yeah,
State to win it all, or at least make it to the national title game. And so um, they weren't they weren't deterred by the prove it to me or I haven't seen it yet kind of
right,
thing.
yeah,
So yeah, I didn't see that in August. Maybe some of it has cropped up and I've missed it, over the last week or two with the kind of sluggish play a bit, with this non-conference slate. But um, yeah, no, I don't see it that way, at least right now. I mean, if they go and lose to Oregon, I think everyone will be on the
yeah,
on the like, yeah, you got to prove it train, which
yeah,
would be more than fair by that at that point.
yeah.
By the way,
Yeah. No, I think David, the short answer to your question is no. We don't really recognize an anti-Penn State bias. There is, however, without a doubt, a pro SEC bias in some pretty big circles. Let's get to a question from Will. Will, we kind of talked about this already in at the start of the pod, but do you guys think that Katron should be the feature back for this game against Oregon? Johnny, just before I turn it over to you, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the easy answer is yes, because he's been incredibly more efficient than Nick Singleton so far. But the longer answer is like they're still probably going to end up with almost even carries, and they're going to need both guys.
yes, yes, yes to all of it.
Mhm.
I would be surprised if Katron Allen isn't the first running back that takes snaps against Oregon. He should be. I mean,
Yeah,
he's earned that over the last 3 weeks. But Nick Singleton is going to have a huge role in the game as well. And like you mentioned, in terms of not just carries but touches overall, because I think Nick could be used in the passing game a little bit more than Katron could. Like I'm not saying that Katron can't go out and catch passes because he can, but Nick in the passing game is something I'm looking forward to seeing against Oregon.
yeah, I think that's an X factor. Will, quick answer there. If you want some more thoughts on the running backs, you'll have to go catch the first part of the pod. Joseph Wolf says they're propping Tysier Denmark in practice. Could we see him versus the Ducks? Johnny, since I was out there at practice, I'll take this one. Yeah, James Franklin said when talking about young players, Tysier Denmark's a guy who during this bye week looks hungry and wants to get after it and shows that he wants to be on the field. I take that at face value. I think it's true. We've heard a lot of good things about Tysier Denmark over his year and a half on campus. We also know that he's a dynamic player with the ball in his hands. We've seen that a little bit. He hasn't played a ton, but the talent is there. It's been a consistency problem to this point. Sounds like maybe that's changing. The only caveat I will say to that, and I'm not buying into this. I'm just offering it as unbiased perspective and maybe giving you an angle you haven't thought about because I noticed it. I didn't even think about it myself when I left practice. but I noticed it. Somebody said it on Twitter. Tyseer Denmark was once an Oregon commit in his high school process, and Penn State went back and flipped him. Like I said, I take what James Franklin said at face value, but we also know very well that James Franklin holds a grudge. And so if an opportunity arose where Tyseer Denmark could be the one to put the nail in the coffin against Oregon in the whiteout, I am not putting it past this Penn State coaching staff to try and do it.
It would make our lives a little easier because that's an easy story to write after the game, Max.
Right.
If that ends up happening. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we also know that they went out and got those 3 transfers for a reason, and we've seen what they've been able to do throughout these first 3 games. And like you mentioned, Tyseer, the inconsistency is what's kind of held him back, I think, in practice in terms of just carving out a role. But if that is changing, that is good news, not only for this year but even for next year as well.
Yeah, I think the top group of the 3 transfers is going to play most of the snaps they have throughout the 3 weeks so far. But if you can get an explosive play out of Tyseer, in 15 to 20 snaps, it's a big deal because it's one more guy that can beat you. I'm sure that he will see the field in some capacity. James Franklin doesn't just say things, but I don't think that he's going to usurp one of the transfers by any means. Joseph, another one. How much has been held back by Kotelnicki? We kind of already addressed that at the top of the pod. It's kind of a we'll see thing. He's probably held a lot back, but he's also put a lot out there just to kind of keep teams honest. You'll have to look back for some more discussion on that. Not really a question, Johnny, but something to keep in mind as we're evaluating Dante Moore. Omni Elite Academy says he has like 6 passes for 30% of his production. I can't confirm or deny that number, but it is a true statement that his 2 games against Montana State and Oklahoma State were significantly better than against Northwestern. And a lot of people aren't going to want to hear this because he has had a few more explosive plays. He's got a 50-yarder and a 65-yarder as longs in his first 2 games. But the overall numbers, minus the completion percentage, the yardage and the touchdowns and the interception, are very similar to Drew Aller so far. He wasn't particularly good against Northwestern, less than 200 yards and a touchdown and an interception.
Yeah, I thought they leaned on the ground game a little bit more against Northwestern, and I'm not going to sit here and be like a Dante Moore stan or anything.
Right.
I'm not. When I was talking earlier about him being the biggest question mark, one, he still has to prove it, and I've written that at every turn. Whether that's in my AP ballot, CFP projections. When I'm talking about Oregon, I've always said he has to prove it in an atmosphere like the whiteout at Beaver Stadium against a defense like Penn State. But you also look overall across the country at some of these 5-star first-year starters. Arch Manning being the biggest example, who have just actively looked bad. Whereas I don't think Dante Moore has. Dante Moore could have easily gone out there and struggled, against, I know Oklahoma State, this iteration of Oklahoma State is bad, but he could have really struggled and really labored for his yards and for his production. I don't think he necessarily has so far. So that's been a takeaway for me.
Yeah. Omni Elite Academy is really rooting for you, Johnny, to just hate on Dante Moore, and you're not going to get it. Look,
the guy could go out there and lay a stinker and be, pull a Kevin Jennings 2.0. And I wouldn't be surprised, when Kevin Jennings, SMU's quarterback, last year in the CFP first round, was all kinds of shook. If Dante Moore does that, I wouldn't be surprised necessarily. He still has to prove it. But if he goes out there and actually plays really well, then I think we've seen some signs that he can do that.
Yeah, I would agree. Even though the production might come from a couple of big plays, he's still completing 78% of his passes. He's been very efficient. Just the 1 turnover to 7 touchdowns. Good stuff. You can't take that. You got to take that for what it's worth, even if it's against bad competition. Johnny, we're at 35 minutes here. I think it's about time to wrap it up. I did want to mention I have a story up from Saturday last week, and there's another one going up Friday morning. If you're catching this recorded, it may already be on the website. If you're watching live, make sure you check it out tomorrow. But Tavian Branch, a little bit of recruiting talk. We haven't done this in a while because it's been all season focused. But Penn State got another 2026 commit at halftime of the FIU game. And I got the chance to talk to Tavian and his head coach, Harry Armstrong, at Riverside. And Johnny, like, obviously, whenever you talk to high school coaches about a kid that's going D1, that's going to Penn State, they have great things to say because all these kids are fantastic high school football players. They wouldn't be going to a Big Ten school if they weren't. But I'm not sure that I've had a head coach gush about a player in the way that Harry Armstrong did to me about Tavian Branch. Just a really cool story of he'd never played football before. They got him in there at 8th grade, and they said, look, you got a great body. Like, to be able to play some football, we need you to start working out and kind of mold it a little bit better, but you've got the size. And he said he went from his freshman year from being a little bit sloppy and a 6'2", 300-pound frame to his sophomore year. He grew to 6'5", shed a little bit of the weight, started playing both sides of the ball, and then something just clicked between sophomore and junior year. He really blew up. He's become a dominant player, at albeit Class 2A level in Pennsylvania, but he's playing both sides of the ball, 100 snaps a game. He said that his work in the weight room is what really triggered it. He just became so competitive and loving the process of refining his body. Like I said, haven't really had a coach gush about a player like that before. So the story that's based around that is already up on Penn Live. You can go seek it out. And then the next story is kind of about his decision to pick Penn State, because obviously he decommitted from Rutgers. He was a quote unquote flip, even though there was some time between them. Really nice kid. Enjoyed my conversation with him. And it's been really good to get to report on this one.
Yeah, no, everyone go check that out. Yeah, it's a big flip for Penn State, and yeah, I mean, look, it's also just good, like, just adds to the good vibes, right? Like they're 3-0. Like, for as much as we've nitpicked, which is, again, I think totally fair to do.
It's part of the job.
Part of the job, especially when you have a non-conference slate like you have. More than fair to nitpick. But this team's 3-0. They just got to commit. They are about to play one of the biggest games of the college football season overall next week.
Yeah.
And they get to hang out this weekend and take in some of the action. I'm looking forward to this weekend, by the way. Like, yeah. I think it's not your headliner weekend. Like, next weekend is a headliner weekend for college football, but there's still some really good games this weekend. Utah, Texas Tech, you got Illinois, Indiana, which could be a CFP elimination game. Like, when you talk about a 10-2, Big Ten team that could get in, behind Penn State, Oregon, and Ohio State. Like, Indiana and Illinois are right there. So that's one I'm really looking forward to watching on Saturday night. You got Florida, Miami's a rivalry game. It's a good weekend. It's a good weekend to have an
Oklahoma is a ranked matchup.
It's a ranked matchup, and it's like a revenge game too, because Jackson Arnold, Auburn's starting quarterback, was Oklahoma's starting quarterback last year, and he got benched. They basically said, like, you're this 5-star guy, but you're not good enough for us. So he goes to Auburn, and now he goes back to Norman. So there's some good football on. It's a good Saturday to be off, Max. As any Saturday, as much as we love covering college football, it's always great to have a Saturday off in the fall.
Yeah, and I know the game that you're probably most looking forward to, Johnny, is USC Michigan State kicking off at 11 p.m. Eastern.
As someone who has not ranked USC on my AP ballot, but has, like, they've been like 26, 27. And as someone who does, like, I finish my AP ballot Saturday night and write up my ballot and schedule it for the next morning for 5 a.m. Sunday, I'm really looking forward to staying up until 2 a.m. to see how that USC Michigan State game goes.
Yeah. We appreciate your dedication as an AP voter, Johnny, because that's gonna be a late night. I know I'll
have a fun one though. Should be a fun one.
It should be. Aiden Childs has taken a step forward so far this year.
I was a year ahead on Aiden Childs. I remember before last season, I did like a Big Ten teams that could surprise, and it was
Mm,
Jonathan Smith's first year as a head coach. Coming over from Oregon State, and he brought Childs with him. From Oregon State, and I was just a year ahead when I was saying Aiden Childs could light it up, could be fun, and he struggled last year, but he's been playing better recently. So and against a USC offense that is putting up
big,
crazy numbers.
big numbers.
Uh, a USC offense that Penn State does not play this regular season, but could be a spoiler for a handful of teams in the Big Ten, not just in the Big Ten, but Notre Dame has to run the table now, Max, to make the
Yeah,
CFP, and they play the Trojans. So
they do.
I little side note to end. I don't think Notre Dame is going to run the table and make the CFP. I think they're dead, but
They're toast. You heard
could
it
be
here
wrong.
first.
Could be
It
wrong.
could be. Yeah, I think Michigan State. I mean, that is a team that's on Penn State's schedule, so we'll have
Mhm.
some eyes there. Let's see if Aiden Childs keeps bringing it. Obviously, I'll have my eyes on Oregon to get a week ahead scout of what the Ducks are doing over there. And I don't even know what is the Oregon State rivalry called. It's got to have a name.
It used to be called the Civil War, but I think they nixed that
Yeah, I don't
for
know, but
I think it was the Civil War.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
it could be.
and then like state legislature got involved and
Yeah.
they got rid of that, which
Okay. Well,
I
maybe
don't
it doesn't have
know.
a nickname anymore, but
I don't know if it
yeah.
does.
Anyway, in-state rivalry going on over there. We'll have our eyes on it.
Yeah.
Penn State and Oregon coming soon. Had some good questions again today. Appreciate everybody who comes in and does that because it makes these podcasts a lot more fun. Gives us some stuff to talk about. We will be back here live on the Blue White Breakdown next Thursday, sharing our predictions for Penn State Oregon. I think it is obviously most highly anticipated game we've had yet. Make sure you're tuning in to all our Penn State coverage, Johnny's Eagles coverage. Make sure you follow the Instagram and Facebook pages. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube page or following for the podcast wherever you get it. You're subscribed to PennLive.com. And yeah, we love having you here. Keep tuning in. Take care.
Up the Reds.
Up the Reds, baby.